Hello. We're going to review the error handling capabilities included in the Apogee Edge platform. Specifically, we'll cover fault rules and the raise fault policy. Let's cover some terminology first. There are two ways that an error can occur within the Apogee Edge platform. The first is if you include a raise fault policy in the flow. In this case, the developer raises an error. The second way an error can occur is if Apogee raises an error during a policy's execution. Apogee can raise an error for lots of reasons, and each policy describes when an error will be thrown. Be sure to review our documentation for details. This will immediately send the request to a fault handler, also known as the error flow. The fault handler is a fault rule that typically has a condition. Think of a raise fault policy as a Java exception and the fault handler as the try-catch block. Fault rules can be included in two locations, the proxy endpoint and the target endpoint. And keep in mind that if you don't have a fault handler, then the default Apogee error message will be returned to the client. Let's look at an example. Here you have a request flow in the proxy endpoint and assume that the verify API key policy throws an error because the API key is not included on the request. Now look at the fault rules section in the proxy endpoint. It has a fault rule named fault.invalidKey. So when the error occurs, the fault is sent to the fault rule where the condition matches the fault name. There's a peculiar feature of fault handling. The proxy endpoint evaluates errors from the bottom up. So if you have multiple fault rules in the fault rules element, then Apogee will evaluate each one starting from the bottom. The target endpoint evaluates errors from the top down. Now you can have multiple fault rules with conditions. If a fault rule does not have a condition, then it always executes. We also have a default fault rule, which is a catch-all handler. If it's configured, then it will execute if no other fault rule is matched. It also has an always enforce flag. When this flag is set to true, it will always execute regardless if another fault rule has already executed. Apogee has a default error message format that's displayed on the screen. You can either rewrite backend error responses to match Apogee's format, or you can create your own custom format. Let's take a closer look at the raise fault policy so you can understand how to configure it. You configure the set element within the fault response element. Here you set the headers, payload, content type, HTTP status code, and the reason phrase. The item to note about the raise fault policy is that every time it executes the proxy, it enters the error state, and the error is sent to the error handler. Therefore, you should include a condition on all of your raise fault policies. This concludes the fault rules and error responses module. If you have any questions, please post them on our community and review our documentation for more details. Thanks for watching.